All right, we've got a submission here from bazzerh. We are running at 2 kilohertz in this log, so it's going to be another 2 kilohertz log. Although I did check when you made your submission. I see that you've got your accelerometer hardware disabled. I thought you also needed baro and mag hardware disabled to get 2 kilohertz. I realize that you probably have an acro board and don't have that hardware on board. So maybe it can auto detect that you don't have it, and so it disables it. Anyway, I'm curious if you can confirm that in fact you're running at 500 loop time. Probably you did. Probably you already did that. That's why you say you're running at 2 kilohertz. I'm curious about that though. I expected to see these at 1, meaning disabled, in order to get the 2 kilohertz mode. Anyway, so whatever. And you are running rewrite, and here's your values. And let's just take a look. I did watch your whole video. It's a 40-second video, so it was easy to watch it all. And you definitely make the most out of your 40 seconds. Giving me a lot to work with. So we can see from anybody who watches your video that your copter's flying. It's pretty tight, and we're definitely in that last whatever 5 or 10% fine tuning mode. There's no big complaints, I think, with how it's flying. Um, let's just go through the motions though. Whoops, that's not what I meant to do. Let's check your gyros. Yaw axis is a little thicker, not super thick, but a little thicker. Um, Nothing really jumps out though. Thin lines here. Good, not too noisy. Um, let's take a look at roll. So one of the things you point out is that your D term is pretty active. Um, and let's take a look. I mean, here's a high throttle scenario where you're literally almost at max throttle. But you're not doing anything crazy like a flip or a roll. You're just kind of going straight. And I noticed that your P term is not really showing any signs of oscillation here. And if we keep looking, we can see that there's here again. So yeah, even when you get to very high throttle, your P term is not being super active. So Boris has espoused a tuning philosophy for the latest revs of Betaflight that he says he seems to get good results with increased P gains and decreased D gains, and that's I guess I'm not sure if that's with 2 kilohertz or with air mode active, but or some other change that I'm not thinking of, but it seems like that could apply here. Um, the D term is not going crazy, but it is definitely active. I think there's always been a good question of just how much D term noise is a problem versus how much actually feels good in flight, even if it looks noisy on the traces. Um, so just from what I'm seeing here, just there's sort of an utter absence of P-term, even the beginnings of what might be P-term oscillations pretty much throughout your trace, and you have lots of. So here, even here, you're at high throttle, and we don't start to see any sort of cyclical regularity coming out of the P term. And I might like to see a little of that. I think you might sharpen up your copter a little by raising your P gain on roll. Right now your roll P is at 4.0. Would you try 4.3 or maybe 4.4 and see what happens? You will probably get a little bit more oscillation during prop wash scenarios, but maybe it'll feel tighter or sharper the rest of the time. Yeah, see, there's not a lot going on here. I might like to see a little more activity here at the high throttle during these straight scenarios. You did a lot of straight runs. How about, I wish we maybe had some kind of banking curves. Now I do also see, hang on one second. Sorry, I had to sneeze. I do also see these high frequency artifacts here, which I think is, that's the second time I've seen them, and I suspect that has something to do with the 2 kilohertz sampling. I don't think I would interpret that as a problem. It's just something going on with the 2 kilohertz sampling, so I don't know what's going on there. Um, yeah, I don't disagree that your D term is pretty active. I don't see it's really hard to see. It's really hard to judge scenarios like this where we've got this high frequency noise coming out and it's making the D term kind of flip out. But number one, I'm not sure whether it's a problem because, you're in the middle of a flip. So, I mean, you kind of just go all out at the limit anyway. Um, and I'm not sure how much D-term activity it takes to become detrimental. If you get to the point where you start to see random twitches or weird oscillations that are indicative of noise amplification, then you go, okay, well, I got there. I got to the point of excessive D. But it's hard to judge looking at the traces whether you're at that point. I think there's a relatively big gray area. And it doesn't feel like you're at that point, though, I'll say. So try increasing P and leaving D alone, is my thought on roll. Let's take a look at pitch. I'm going to kind of look at the same thing and assess the P term here. I have a theory that as we go into the higher frequency sampling, 2 kilohertz and so on, that the P term will become more dominant and the D term will become less dominant. My theory is that as the sampling rate gets higher and higher, there will be more ability to sort of directly control things with the P term and less need for the D term to kind of look ahead and rein in the P term, or kind of shove it to go faster or yank it to go slower. We'll see if that turns out to be true. Here, right here, do you see how we're starting to see some regularity in the P term? That's what I mean when I say that there's not, I said on roll, I don't see a lot of signs of sort of regularity oscillations starting to come out. Right here, we're starting to see some sort of regular hills in the P term. Now you ask whether your D term is overactive, and so if we look at a situation like this, for example, now you're not doing a flip or a roll here, you're doing a turn. Let's watch it. And then you throttle up. That's kind of a prop wash situation, and we definitely start to see a very active D term. The magnitude is not dominatingly extreme. If we look at your PID sum, we can get a better sense of that. And you can see there the PID sum is not being dominated by the D term, right? So although we do now here we start to see the D term become a little more dominant, right? You can see that the PID sum looks a little bit more like the D term trace, right? It becomes a little more dominant. And now we're out of that prop wash situation and it's gone back to behaving. Yeah, so it's especially in this new paradigm of 2 kilohertz, and while Boris is playing with the D-term filtering, though, what's your D-term cut hertz? Are you using that? It's 0, so you're using the 3-term averaging or whatever it is. And you've got your yaw P-term cut hertz at 50. Interesting. That's interesting. We'll look at that in a minute. It's hard to judge this D traces. I would say it's worth playing with reducing your D gains and increasing your P gains. It does seem like your P gains could come up here. I don't see any signs of sort of bad behavior in the P term. And so I'm coming to the philosophy that, I mean, I've always had the philosophy that you want your P gains as high as you can reasonably have them. And so how do you know when you're there? Well, one way is to turn them up until you just start to see the barest signs of bad behavior, of oscillation. starting to come out and then back them down again. And I'm starting to come to the philosophy that I might prefer it a little better if I'm just barely starting to see that bad behavior. The analogy I make is, you know, you take a racing driver takes a car around a track, the tires are going to squeal every now and then, right? The tires don't squeal, you're not on the edge enough. So I think that your P term could come up on both pitch and roll. Uh, I'm just not seeing any sort of things that look like P-term oscillations. Here we're starting to see some movement, right? Some activity, some regular cyclicalness come out. And here the waves are getting bigger, right? So yeah, that's starting to get there. And I guess what I'm saying is see if you can push that up a little more. If you start to get stuff that looks like hard oscillations, then back it down again. But it feels like you can probably bump it a little more, get a little sharper, uh, and get a little better performance out of it. I agree that your D term trace looks pretty out of control. I think some of that is the illusion. It was pointed out recently. The D term scaling is not scaled the same um, as the P term, and so it looks more dramatic than it really is. You might could knock D down a little bit on pitch. Roll looked okay to me. Let's take a look at yaw real quick. Now you've got some 50 hertz filtering on your P term on yaw. Yaw does not look like it's going nuts at all. And your D on yaw looks quite oh, sorry, that's not D, that's the gyro. I guess you have 0 D gain on yaw. Is that it? Yeah, you've got 0 on yaw. Okay, fine. So you can't really look for oscillations on yaw P term because by the time you get to oscillations, it's really bad. It's way over the line. So this to me looks like roughly a level of activity that I think would probably be a good yaw. Just looking at how spiky this line is, basically. I don't see any signs of oscillation or anything like that. A normal amount of movement. I think on this one, if your yaw feels good, I don't have any specific suggestions there. Your P is at 7. Yeah. Okay, so there you go. Those are my thoughts. Hope they're helpful and happy flying.